Welcome back to the In the Clinic podcast with Rob. I am Rob Sumner, and if you are looking to learn about how we can create a metabolic MRI, well, this is the podcast for you. Hi, my name is Rob Sumner, physical therapist of Sumner Specialized Physical Therapy and Specialized Strength, where we combine personal training and physical therapy, mesh them together so that we can bring the ultimate wellness to our clients. All right, welcome back. In the last episode, we talked about something that most people don't realize is quietly slipping away as they age. Aerobic capacity. Your VO2 max. Your ability for your body to take in oxygen, transport it, and use it to produce energy. And we talked about how this single marker is one of the strongest predictors of how long and how well you're going to live. But here's the question that naturally follows that conversation. If this is so important, why aren't we measuring it? Why don't most people know this number? Why are we still relying on estimates when it comes to the physiology that drives our energy, our metabolism, and ultimately our longevity? That question is exactly what pushed us to make a decision here at the clinic. We decided that if we are serious about helping people extend the quality of their life in Stevens County, then we can't just rely on generalized advice. We need precision. We need real data. We need to see inside the system that produces energy. And that's where advanced metabolic testing comes in. One of the ways I like to explain this to people is that this type of testing is almost like getting an MRI of your metabolism. Not a picture of bones or joints, but a picture of how your body actually produces energy, how you use oxygen, what fuel you're actually burning, and how efficiently our system is operating. Because once you can see that, well, you can start making very specific changes that move the needle. So let's talk about what you can see right now, because most people assume metabolism is just one thing. They think it's simply, how fast do I burn calories? But metabolism is far more complex than that. When we do metabolic testing, we're really looking at several major systems working together. The first one we already mentioned in part 1, which is VO2 max, your maximum oxygen uptake. This tells us the size of your engine, how much oxygen your body can utilize when pushed towards its limit. Higher VO2 max generally means stronger heart function, better oxygen delivery, more mitochondria, greater endurance, greater resilience. But VO2 max alone doesn't tell the whole story, because another extremely important piece of physiology is something called metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to switch between fuel systems. Your body can run on two primary fuels, carbohydrates and fats. And a metabolically flexible person can easily transition between the two depending on the activity level. At rest, they burn more fat. During high-intensity activity, they shift towards carbohydrates. Then they transition back again. But many people today are metabolically inflexible. Their bodies rely heavily on carbohydrates, even at low intensities. That pattern is often associated with insulin resistance, weight loss difficulty, energy crashes, constant hunger, fatigue during exercise. When we measure this in real time, we can see exactly where your body sits on that spectrum. And for many people, this becomes one of the biggest aha moments. Because suddenly the struggle they've had with weight or energy starts making physiological sense. So take another piece of the puzzle, which is resting metabolic rate. This is the number of calories your body burns just to keep you alive, for breathing, circulation, cellular repair, organ function, just to keep you at the right temperature. Most calorie calculators online estimate the number using population averages. But those estimates can be off by hundreds of calories, and that makes a difference. Because if someone is eating for a metabolism that is slower than they think, well, weight loss becomes incredibly frustrating. If someone is eating too little for their actual metabolic needs, well, their metabolism can slow down even further. And this is one of the reasons why we see people, especially women over the age of 50, feeling like they're doing everything right but not seeing progress. Without measuring metabolism, we're just guessing. So another fascinating thing we can analyze is breathing efficiency. Most people never think about their breathing patterns at all. And they don't think about them during exercise. But the relationship between oxygen intake and carbon dioxide output tells us a tremendous amount about how your body is producing energy. It helps us see how efficient oxygen is being used, how early fatigue might occur, whether your system is relying too heavily on one energy pathway. In other words, we're not just looking at how hard someone is working. We're looking at how their body is responding internally. And that is where the magic of metabolic testing really begins. So once we have this data, something powerful happens. We stop guessing. Instead of saying, try doing more cardio, we can say things like, this is the heart rate zone where your body burns fat most efficiently. Instead of saying, maybe you should just eat fewer calories, we can say, this is what your metabolism actually burns at rest. Instead of saying, well, you just need to push harder, we can say, this is the intensity that will stimulate improvement in your aerobic system. And that level of precision changes outcomes because the body adapts very specifically to the signals we give it. When training intensity is too low, adaptation doesn't occur. When intensity is too high, the system becomes overstressed. But when intensity is targeted correctly, that's where improvement accelerates. And that improvement shows up in the places that matter most. Better energy, improved endurance, more efficient fat burning, better recovery, and ultimately improved longevity markers. Now let me give you a few examples of patterns we often see. Not specific individuals, but common physiological stories. And one pattern we frequently see is someone who is very active. They walk regularly, they stay busy, but their VO2 max falls into the lower ranges. They're active, but they're not stimulating the cardiovascular system enough to actually improve capacity. Another pattern is someone who exercises regularly but struggles with weight loss. When we test them, we often see a heavy reliance on carbohydrates as fuel, even at lower intensities. So their body simply hasn't developed strong fat oxidation. And once we identify that, we can adjust training intensities to improve metabolic flexibility. And another common scenario is someone who eats very little because they're trying to lose weight. But when we measure their metabolism, we discover their body has adapted by slowing their metabolic rate. And in those situations, eating more and doing that strategically can actually support metabolic recovery. So these just highlight how this all can be incredibly empowering because they turn confusion into clarity. At the end of the day, this technology is not about testing for the sake of testing. It's about understanding the system. Your body is incredibly sophisticated. Your heart, your lungs, your blood, your muscles, your mitochondria, they all work together to produce energy. And when we measure how that system is functioning, well, we can begin improving it in very specific ways. This is why metabolic testing has become such an important starting point for people who are serious about improving their health trajectory. Because the more clearly we can see the system, the more precisely we can guide the work that improves it. So in our next episode, we're going to zoom out even further. We're going to talk about what this means for the long-term health of people of Stevens County. What it means for people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who want to stay strong, and how measuring these systems can help extend not just lifespan, but health span. Because living longer is one thing, living stronger is another. And the goal of everything that we're doing here is helping people do both. Thanks for tuning in today, and I will see you next time. Stay tuned for part 3 of how we're going to change lives. See you then.